Today on the podcast, we're joined by Leland Mack, scout with the Prince George Cougars of the WHL. Leland, thanks for joining the podcast.
Great to be on the show.
Yeah, I always love getting scouts on, and being from the East Coast, a lot of my contacts are from this way, and you being a West Coast scout and with a West Coast team, it just offers another demographic and allows us to learn a little bit more about scouting in that area and the league itself and different experiences that you've had. So let's dive right into it and learn about you. Starting off, maybe tell people a little bit about where you're from, growing up, playing sports, and just a general overview of you as a person.
Sure. I grew up in Northwest Calgary. Huge hockey fan, obviously. I was lucky to grow up on a street in West Hillhurst in Northwest Calgary, where the street was twice the size of a normal suburb street. So that was awesome for street hockey. So that's where a love of hockey grew, as well as my grandpa had a backyard rink that we play on every Sunday, which was definitely where the love of hockey grew even more for me, which was great. And, growing up, it was hockey in the winter, baseball in the summer, and all sorts of sports throughout there. I started going to college at Mount Royal in Calgary, and took every class possible. And then I sort of had an opportunity to go to school out in Vancouver, and I thought, you know what, why not? Like let's move out there and see what happens. And I already had started coaching at 22 years old in Calgary, and hockey, the love of coaching and the love of getting involved in sports in a different way was there. So that's where my sort of love for hockey grew, and that's what took me from one place to the next.
Yeah, the passion for the game can really haul you all over, and sometimes you kind of just got to bury your head and make the move and see what happens. And I understand having the water streets. We have some of those out this way as well, and it allows you to get some pretty good road hockey games and even shooting pucks around the winter. So great to hear you had those early experiences and were able to take that next step to pursue your passion. Looking at schooling, one of the things that you were able to do during that time was actually pursue sports science, in a couple of different schooling options there. Just talk about the decision to go into that area and, your schooling experience overall.
Yeah, like I said, I went to Mount Royal, and my parents were very nice, and they let me take any class that I wanted to take. So I took philosophy, psychology, astronomy. Like, I just took every course possible with no real plan. And that's when, around the same time, I started coaching hockey and started really loving hockey. So I just started searching the internet, seeing if there's any sort of coaching specific program anywhere. And I noticed that in Douglas College in New West out here on the West Coast, they had a sports science coaching diploma program. And I thought, you know what, like, might as well make the move out there and try and focus more on that coaching and getting a diploma in that. So I got in. I made the big move out to Vancouver. Took a couple of years there, got my sports science diploma, learned a lot, met a bunch of nice people. And along that same track, my coaching career started going up and up and moving from level to level to level. So I figured, hey, let's just stay out in Vancouver, and I'm still here.
Yeah, no, it's a great place. I had a chance to go out there a few years back and love the city and the area overall. And whenever you can fuel your passion in your schooling, I think it's an opportunity that you always want to take. And a lot of people maybe are a bit hesitant to go in that direction early on, just because they don't know about job opportunities. And as everybody knows, in the sports world, especially in hockey, maybe even more so, it can definitely be a grind trying to find positions and make ends meet. But you're able to do that and then also get involved in the coaching. And one of your early coaching positions was with the Vancouver Giants, the minor hockey program as an assistant coach. Talk about that early experience and maybe what you learned, albeit, you had a couple of different opportunities before that as well.
Yeah, for sure. So I played hockey my whole life, but I never played at a super high level. So like I said, I really had to grind on whether it's going to school or just putting in lots of time to sort of gain that experience and gain that reputation. So I was lucky that I met a guy named John Calvano, who was the coach of the Vancouver Northwest Giants, and he asked me if I wanted to be an assistant coach. And I was like, yeah, like, let's do this. Like, the year before, I was at home at Calgary at Christmas watching the Max tournament, and Northwest Giants were playing in it. And I remember saying, like, man, if I could coach one team in Vancouver for midget hockey, it would be the Vancouver Northwest Giants, because they were really good every year and they had all these good players. So I got to jump on board with that team, and it was awesome. The first year we had Jordan Wheel, who plays for Montreal. He was an unbelievable player. We had a great record. We got to go to the Max tournament. I got to experience coaching top level players, and and we had an unreal year. We like only lost 2 games or something like that, except we kind of blew it in playoffs. But trying to forget about that, and that experience of being around those high level people and those high level athletes was amazing. The next season with Northwest Giants, we had Ryan Nugent Hopkins on the team, as well as Colton Sissons, and just being around those kids when they're developing and just one step away from junior, it was just unbelievable. Like someone like Ryan Nugent Hopkins was such a great kid and such a great person and so talented. Like we ended up going to the Max Midget final that year and we lost in overtime, which still stings, but it was just so many great experiences and getting to be around high level athletes. And around that same time, I started doing more skill development at Burnaby Winter Club. And I always remember the first skill development session I ever helped out with was the Burnaby Winter Club Adam AAA team. And I went on the ice and there was these 2 kids that were really good. And one of them was named Matthew Barzell and the other one was named Dante Fabro. And I remember thinking like, wow, how are these kids that are 9 or 10 years old so good? And they loved hockey, and the session would end and they would stay out on the ice for as long as they could. And that's where I kind of went like, wow, this Burnaby Winter Club is a whole new level of hockey and commitment to hockey that I'd never seen before. And it was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, anytime you get to work with elite players, and especially you can tell some of those players, obviously Barzell and Fabro, 2 NHL players with Nashville and the Islanders, you get to see them even at that age just perfecting their craft and really building towards something at the next level, which a lot of kids maybe take a little bit more time to kind of see that bigger picture. So no doubt that they would go on and have that opportunity. But as you as a coach, you're able to interact with these players on a daily basis, the number of different athletes that you mentioned. And again, it fuels you to kind of move forward in your passion for the game and see what else is out there. And soon after, you would take a head coaching role, this time with the Greater Vancouver Canadians. Just talk about that position and maybe how your approach changed, in a head coach role this time around.
I felt after the 2 years with the Northwest Giants, it was a great experience. And I got to be a head coach at a BC Cup, which is like the U16 pre-draft tournament. And that experience of being a head coach, I felt like, hey, like I think I can do this. So I applied for the Greater Vancouver Canadians. I ended up getting the position, which was exciting. But then I had to refocus my mind where it wasn't the Northwest Giants where you were just packed with talent. We didn't have as much talent, but it was an exciting adventure, right? The first year we had Troy Stetcher on the team, who plays for the Red Wings now. And we had some good years. I coached there 4 years. We had some really good teams and some really good players. But yeah, being a head coach is definitely a lot easier. Being an assistant coach, you just throw out ideas and don't have to worry about cutting anyone or making any harsh decisions. But when you're a head coach, the eyes are on you, the parents are on you, and it's a great challenge, but it was also a lot of fun, right? We also got to go to the Max tournament, and that was a great experience. And we had some great teams. Like the first year, like I said, Troy Stetcher was on the team, and he was an amazing kid and a great player that year. The next year, our goalie was Tristan Jari, you could see he was going to be a pro player, just the way how composed and how talented he was in net. Which was amazing. And then those 4 years with the Greater Vancouver Canadians, we had some great battles, and the experience was great. We met great people, and it was just being a head coach in that league. It was the only league around, and all the best players were in it, and it was so much great experience and so much learning from the players and learning for me as a coach personally.
Yeah, the coaching experience is all about learning, especially at the minor hockey level. And everybody thinks obviously you're doing what you can to help the players and fuel the players. And at the U18 level, it's a little bit of a different approach, but at the same time, you're still trying to push them to that next level. And another way you can do that, obviously, is the skill work. And you hinted at that a little bit earlier with the Burnaby Winter Club. Coaching the Elite 15s and doing some work there. Just talk about some of the players that you had the opportunity to work with in that capacity again. And just talk about maybe that experience for your own development as well.
Yeah, getting into the skill development was great. There's a lot of positives you can get out of it, and as long as you're doing it the right way. And being around, like I always say, everyone comes through Burnaby Winter Club eventually. So the amount of good players I got to be around that are playing in the NHL now was just exceptional. Like we did a camp one year, and in it was Brendan Gallagher and Ryan Johansson and Ryan Nugent Hopkins. And it was just to be around those players, and not that I'm going to have some big impact on them, just to see them at that point and maybe give them a little tip or two here was just such a cool experience, and then even go on with the ice with older players that were in the NHL or near the NHL. It was kind of like, wow, like, am I really out here with these guys? Do I deserve to be out here with these guys, and stuff like that? And the skill development, obviously, it's taken off, and it seems like everyone's a skill developer now, or has a company. But those experiences of skill development, and I still do a little bit to these days, were great. And being around, I've had some groups of specifically O1 players like Sasha Mutala, Henry Rubinski, who are NHL drafts, where I got to kind of coach with them in the spring 3 or 4 years in a row, and it was great experience getting to know those players, giving them little tricks and tips here or there, and really building that bond and focusing on that.
Yeah, it's always fun to hear about these elite programs, and the Burnaby Winter Club is one that a lot of people will know. And if you don't, I definitely advise listeners to kind of look into it a little bit more, because, like you said, the talent that goes through there is very elite, and some of the best players out that way will tend to go through that program. But for you, again, you're able to interact with these players and all these elite players. It's another learning opportunity, and skills work is a little bit different than the general coaching position. Just there is a little bit more technicality involved, but maybe it leads to future opportunities in scouting where you can identify different things, and we'll definitely get into that as well moving forward. But another opportunity I wanted to talk about is your time with BC Hockey. You said you had a coaching experience there before moving into your head coaching role with the Vancouver Canadians, and I know you worked as a lead evaluator and a couple different things with that program. So again, definitely having a lot of players go through BC Hockey, with it being the governing body there. Just talk about your experience with the brand and some of the things that you took away from those experiences to date.
Well, like I said, again, without a junior hockey career or pro hockey career under my belt, I really had to volunteer and do as much as I can to get myself out there. So I started in 2005 as a what they call a group leader with a BC hockey evaluation camp, where you just basically take the players from the school to the rink and kind of babysit them. And I remember on my team that year was Evander Kane. And then I started with a group leader. The next year I got to be a coach, where I got to coach in the BC Winter Games, which was a cool experience. And then I got to be a head coach in U16, and I stayed as an evaluator for basically every year up until a couple of years ago. And eventually they decided to branch off into a U15 program and a U16 program. And they put me in charge of lead evaluator for the U15 group, which was actually a really great experience as a scout, where my job was to coordinate all the provincial camps, make sure there's scouts and evaluators at each one, and then combine all those lists and pick the top 120 players to go to BC Cup. So that was a great experience. If you want to be a head scout or a director of player personnel, that type of job was great experience, working with BC Hockey and be able to identify talent and figure out, if the best player in Prince George is similar to the, eighth best player in the Lower Mainland or in the Okanagan. And that experience was really great for 3 years. As well, I got to help out with the evaluation of the U16, which they go to a tournament called the WHL Cup for Team BC as well. And I coached Team BC, ended up 3 times, twice as an assistant and once as a head coach. I coached assistant with the 98s with Fabro and Jost were on the team, and Dylan Coughlin, who just played for Vegas. And then I did head coach with the 2000s. And then just past year I did with the 2004s, I did assistant coach with Team BC, which was a cool experience at the WHL Cup. But yeah, I didn't have a great playing experience, so I had to just volunteer thousands, and honestly thousands and thousands and thousands of hours just to build contacts, to build experience. And you know what? It was worth it.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate anybody that goes through that grind. I always tell people I'm a house league player, and a bad house league player at best. So, as someone I work in the OHL, obviously you in the WHL, but I still appreciate the amount of work that it takes, and a lot of people really don't understand just how many hours and volunteer hours, for the most part, are involved with kind of breaking into the industry and moving up the ladder. Another opportunity I want to talk about that you went through is with Delta Hockey Academy, one that I'm not as familiar with, and maybe listeners might not be as well. But in any case, just talk about that position with that brand, and give us an overview of the academy overall.
Sure. So it was while I was coaching Major Midget with the Greater Vancouver Canadians. So this was before academies became teams. This is when the academies were just you went to school and instead of gym, you went on the ice with a bunch of different players from a bunch of different teams. So I was lucky enough to get that was kind of my day job. And then I volunteered as a major midget coach at night. But I started off with Delta and a couple other academies around the lower mainland. And Delta was a great experience. It was run by Ian Gallagher, who's Brendan Gallagher's father and was the strength coach with the Vancouver Giants. And the ability to be out with these top players and during the thought of going on the ice during the day at the time was just amazing. Like everyone else is in school and these kids get to go on the ice. So that was a great experience. And one of the best parts of it was every week I got to go on the ice with Don Hay and just push pucks for him for a whole year. I think it was every Tuesday I got to go on the ice with Don Hay, and he would run drills and we would talk before the practice and after the practice, and just experiencing something like that was just unbelievable. And just the little tidbits you get from him every day is from his coaching mind, like he's a master coach. That was really cool, and that was a great experience, which sort of led me into coaching at the Burnaby Winter Club Academy.
Yeah, Don Hay, definitely a name that a lot of people will recognize. And again, if you don't recognize the name, I highly suggest that you look it up because so much knowledge there, and being able to learn from someone like that, and in the middle of the day. Again, a lot of people understand that's a privilege for sure. Being able to get on the ice during the day, it's usually early mornings and fighting for time in the evenings. So great to hear about that experience overall, and being able to have kind of a mentorship role in that capacity as well. But let's move into the WHL now. Your first experience was with the Seattle Thunderbirds. Again, let's just talk about how maybe you got to Seattle and the initial transition to scouting in the WHL.
Sure, it's a good story for all those people wanting to work their way up. I was a hockey nerd and I was scouring the internet and I looked on every single WHL team's website to see if they had contact info for any of the scouting staff or coaching staff. And the only team that did was the Seattle Thunderbirds, and their head coach at the time was named Rob Sumner. And I just emailed him like, hey, like I'm a young coach here in Vancouver. Just want to know, if you have any advice or anything like that. And for the next couple of years, we would email back and forth, and he would send me these real thoughtful, detailed emails about practices or coaching or tips or whatnot. And that was great. And then one day out of the blue, he just gave me a call. Hey, it's Rob Sumner. We're looking for a scout in Seattle. At the time, I was more focused on coaching, but I thought scouting would be a great experience for me. So I said, yeah. And I jumped on board. I got in my car, drove to Seattle for camp that year. And that's where I started sort of developing my scout side of thing, which is definitely a different mindset than coaching is. And learning that side and seeing the behind the scenes from a WHL perspective was another great eye-opening experience for me.
Yeah, I always love hearing how you kind of get into scouting, and generally on the podcast, we'll hear it comes from building relationships, and even in that capacity, making that connection to the team. It wasn't really you were at no point were you asking to become a scout. It was more so just I want advice and wonder if you can offer some different thoughts on coaching practices, things that you guys would talk about, and it kind of builds into something bigger. And now you're a scout with the organization, and moving into today, you're now with the Prince George Cougars, same league, obviously on the other side of the border this time. Tell us how you kind of moved into Prince George, and then just talk about your experience with the team to date.
Well, I was with Seattle for 10 years and it was amazing. We won a championship and the organization flipped to two different owners and the owners the new owners were amazing and the new GM was amazing. But I really wanted to see if I could move up the ranks in scouting, and Prince George reached out and said they're looking for a little bit higher role. And I thought, you know what, it's sometimes good to change things up, learn a different organization, learn how they tick. And Prince George had a whole whack of draft picks coming up. So I thought, hey, let's give this a try. And I got to meet Bob Simmons, who's the head scout there, and Mark Lamb is the head coach and GM. And we had 3 first-round picks the last year, and we're super excited the future of the Prince George Cougars. And sometimes you just got to change for the sake of changing, and that's basically all it was for me. A little bit bigger role, and trying to build something kind of from the ground up with Prince George, which was awesome, and still should be awesome going forward.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't realize. Sometimes you can be in a position and the hockey industry changes a lot, and sometimes a different staff, and sometimes it's just a matter of looking for a new opportunity. Maybe you've kind of grown or outgrown the role that you're in, and you're looking for maybe a different perspective or a different opportunity. Prince George had a lot of draft picks. Obviously, as a scout, that's something that always excites people, and
Mhm.
people have been on record all the way to the NHL level saying that it's tough when you look at the first 3 rounds of the draft and you guys got no picks. But for you, it definitely sounds like it was a great transition, and a great team again in Prince George. A lot of people will recognize the organization as the WHL is a top tier league in that area. Moving into some maybe different opportunities and some more reflective questions here. One of the experiences I wanted to talk about briefly is your time coaching Team Calgary inline. I know it's a little bit different than the ice hockey scene, and a little bit different in that capacity, but maybe just talk about the sport and even how that opportunity helped develop your thinking early on for coaching and future opportunities.
Yeah, I was a young coach, and I obviously rollerbladed before, but I'd never played inline hockey. So I was working for a company, and the company was combined ice hockey and a combined inline hockey. And the guy that ran the company said, "Hey, you want to try coaching inline?" And I thought, okay, I don't really know anything about it, but sure. So I started that same year, that same summer. I played inline, and I coached inline, and definitely learned a lot about the game. There are some differences from ice hockey, and then was fortunate enough to be picked as the head coach for Team Calgary to go to the Alberta Summer Games, which was a cool experience. We won a silver medal or lost in the gold medal game, and that, I don't know, it was a great experience because I realized, you know, these kids, they love hockey, but then they're also this whole different world of inline hockey, which is a whole different world. And to see the game, to see the subtleties and the nuances that make it different from ice hockey, I think just made me a better coach overall and helped me. And I still think about those. I still got the picture up in my room of that inline team and with Team Calgary, and just, yeah, there's little subtle differences between inline hockey, and I'll never forget it. And I think of it quite often, actually.
Yeah, I was very interested when I saw that position on your resume, and always like learning about the different things that you can haul into the game of hockey, and maybe even in another sense, like sledge hockey, something that I'll kind of look into every now and then just to see how the game is played, differences in tactics and things like that, and maybe it's something you can haul back into coaching in general ice hockey or inline hockey. It's not as big out east or in Newfoundland anyway, but still another thing that I'll look to every now and then to see how it's played and what can be tied into the game of ice hockey. Another question for you. As you hinted at before, in the Western provinces, prep school and academy hockey is kind of overtaking, in some places, the minor hockey scene. It's a little bit different in the draft process. For those who aren't as familiar with a lot of those teams in that loop, just talk about the degree of hockey with a lot of those academies and just a general overview of the kind of the system for minor hockey in that area.
Sure. So, like you said, it's grown a lot since Academy started popping out around here in 2009. Now there's tons of teams. So the basic model is you go to school, you train during the day, you stay as a team, you go on the ice during the day, and then you go and play the other like-minded sports schools, and it's really grown and grown and grown and grown, where the players and the parents, they want to be in that environment where they're on the ice every day. They're getting that skill development, and then they're getting that great gameplay, and those top people and those top high performance athletes. They want to be in a model like that. So that's really exploded. And with the Bantam League, or U15 Prep as it's called now, it's an awesome league to coach in. I've been fortunate enough to coach in it the last 3 years, and every game you're playing against guys that are going to be future stars in the WHL and pro. It's such a cool league to play in. It's such high competitive games, and to go all those major tournaments, and people really like that academy model because it's just so focused on development.
Yeah, development really is the main focus at that level, and it should be anyway. So, when you have a process like the academy style, which is really built around getting on the ice, small area, skill development, all these components that you see lost in minor hockey sometimes, but it's definitely been growing in the last couple of years, and it's great to hear that the system in the Western provinces has worked as a result. Looking at another area, Seattle. Obviously, you spent 10 years with the Thunderbirds and were able to win a championship, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But just talking about the city of Seattle and that area as a hockey community, Maybe for people who are interested in Seattle Kraken, what are your thoughts on Seattle in terms of its hockey fandom, and how do you see the team transitioning there in the next couple of years?
Oh, it's going to be awesome. I could speak for any of the U.S. divisions in the WHL. Their fans are amazing. Being able to go down, it's only a 3-hour drive from Vancouver, driving down to watch a Thunderbird Portland Winterhawks game, unbelievable. The fans are going crazy. The Seattle fans are yelling Portland sucks. They cheer. That every little like push, every fan stands up wanting a fight. Like they're so passionate about hockey. Every person I noticed at a Seattle Thunderbirds game, they just wear any hockey jersey. They don't necessarily wear a Thunderbirds jersey or a Portland jersey. They just wear whatever hockey jersey they have because they support, and I found that with Seattle, whether it's the Mariners or the Seahawks or UW, they love their sports, and I think the Kraken will have great fan support, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. It's a great sports town, and the love of hockey out there will just grow and grow and grow, and it'll be interesting to see how the minor hockey grows in Seattle because of that.
Yeah, I really think that's something that a lot of people forget about, and you see it so much in junior hockey when they're tied into the minor hockey loop that it's not always just the success of the junior team, the minor hockey impact, and you're seeing players come out of these communities. It really is tied into the team. So anytime you can get a high level hockey team like the WHL in Seattle, it's great. And when you throw an NHL team on top of that, you can only imagine the growth of sport and with that the popularity in that region. So I'm sure, like we're seeing down in some states like Arizona and these places that have grown over the years, I'm sure Seattle will be another hotbed, and the WHL will be even stronger as a result. Dealing with the unique WHL draft, it's a little bit of a challenge. It's a year younger than, say, the OHL and some of these other leagues deal with. How often do you find yourself having to kind of adapt your mindset in trying to figure out, okay, how is the development going to work for this player, and just dealing with the unique nature of the draft? Maybe give some people some insight to that where possible.
Yeah, that's what your mindset has to be. Your mindset is, what is this player going to look like when he's 18 and 19 in comparison to the other players, which is tough because they're 14 when you're when you're watching them play. So, obviously you're looking at hockey sense, skating, all the normal skill elements, but generally you're also looking at other things like are their parents big? Are their brothers big? If size is everything, if size is not everything, but if size is important, then all of those things matters, as well as maturity off the ice. And it is tough. It is tough drafting 14-year-olds and projecting what they're going to be as 18-year-olds. But if you watch a good player and he's a good player, he's probably going to be a good player when he's 18 years old, if not better. There are late bloomers, the guys that are smaller or haven't quite hit their stride yet, which can make it tough. But I think you take all the factors you can and project, and if you're right, awesome. If you're not, then you just say, hey, I was wrong, and you move on.
Yeah, essentially that's the way it goes. And luckily in junior hockey, you got a lot of draft picks and a constant flow of players coming in, and we don't see the billions of dollars or millions of dollars, I should say, vested in NHL hockey. But I always love hearing people's thoughts on that draft process. And as everybody knows, the three CHL leagues do have a little bit differences between them. QMJHL being a different draft than OHL even, and obviously with the West Coast having their own style. But a lot of great points there, and just dealing with that draft process. You've been able to scout. Go ahead.
I think 25% of the WHL is unlisted or listed players. Sorry, so that's players that didn't get taken in the draft, improve, get better, and then end up making the league. I think it's like Shea Weber, Jerome McGinley, like these all guys are that, so not getting drafted isn't the end of the world for a young athlete. It's just get better, develop. And if your goal is to play in the WHL or the OHL or the Q, as long as you stick with it and develop your game, whether you're drafted or not, isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And even like in a place like Ontario, from my own experience, you see so many players, having capabilities of making that next level. Like, even though it is a big draft, there has to be a cutoff somewhere. So I'm sure there's always a short list of players that you wish you could have drafted that simply you just run out picks. So it's great to see when a player really takes that initiative and kind of use that maybe undrafted status to fuel their desire and fuel their passion. And you see that development, and then you see them breaking in later in the league and going on even to the NHL in a lot of cases. So a great point there, just talking about the draft process and how not being drafted in that first, go at it isn't always the end all be all that a lot of people maybe make it out to be. You've been able to scout obviously in your current role, but have had a lot of coaching experience, skill development, and then in the team setting. A lot of people will create a connection between the two, but as you even mentioned earlier, there are a lot of differences. So just talk about maybe the relationship between coaching and scouting and how you lean on both maybe in the other capacity.
I definitely think there's a different mindset for coaches versus scouts, having been experienced at both, I definitely see the difference. Coaching, although you're trying to develop players with a long-term mindset, generally it's a short-term mindset where, if you talk about a player on the team and you ask the coach how he's doing, their response might be dependent upon how good they played last game. Where, hey, how's this guy? Oh, well, he didn't get it out in the last period, so I hate him right now. Whereas in the scout mind, you're always kind of projecting players. Well, he's going to be a good player 2 or 3 years from now. So being able to take both those mindsets where you're always looking long term as a sort of scout mind and projecting he's going to be a good player. He's still got to work on a few things, but he's going to be a good player, where a coach mindset is more normally like, what have you done for me lately? And they might not see like, yeah, he's going to be a good player. They're kind of just more like, I need him to be good today. I need him to be the best forechecker today. And if he's not, then I'm going to say he's bad. Or if he scored the goal, then he's the greatest player I've ever seen, and you should draft him in the first round, where a scout mindset is generally sort of long-term focused and kind of not jumping to conclusions based on one game or one shift or anything like that.
Definitely. I think if you're in a scouting capacity and you got that last game before the draft and a player scores a hat trick and you throw him into the first round, unless it just so happens to be one of the top players, you're going to be in trouble if you're keeping that short-term mindset in the draft process. But definitely coaching while you are trying to evaluate the whole year, there is situations where, a player can go on a streak and you're kind of giving them some more leash in that sense. And essentially that's just with the long-term goals of both coaching and scouting in mind. And great description of the relationship there as well. You've been able to scout in Seattle and Prince George, one being the Canadian WHL team and one being an American team. Do you find the draft process ever different? And obviously, as an area scout, you might not be as involved in the recruiting process, but does it change your mindset even a little bit, just having that different location and looking at players maybe from the US or from Canada?
A little bit. I'd say when I was with Seattle, mostly the parents would be asking questions about how the schooling is different. Going from a school in Regina to a school in Seattle, how the curriculum would be different, how the classes would transfer, stuff like that. They're always curious about. But I think if you're with Seattle, if there's an American player, you're excited, and especially if he's a local kid in Washington, you're excited by that. Prince George, same idea. If you can get a player from in Prince George or near Prince George, that's a little bit more exciting. But other than that, I mean, WHL is an awesome league no matter where you're playing. So I don't think it's that big of a factor besides the little things like parents asking about school and stuff like that.
For sure. I think that's something that I like to ask just to give people's opinions on the topic. But even in the last couple of years, we're seeing players go all over, and in Ontario, it could be an example of northern players kind of going different places and being recruited, not so much just the northern teams as we've seen. And I'm sure in the past, Prince George, people may have believed that, okay, to play in Prince George, you want to be from that area. But obviously that's exciting. But you're seeing players just go to the programs now. And I think that, again, hints at the growing level of CHL hockey and the WHL specifically with those programs. So another thing I wanted to talk about before we get into some other questions here is the experience of winning a championship as a scout in a WHL team. Every position feels a little bit different. I know I was able to be a part of a Kelly Cup championship, but as an intern, it has a different feel than, say, being a head coach or someone that's really involved in different areas. So maybe just talk about the experience of winning as a scout and some of the feelings that you had around that time.
Sure. My first 5 or 6 years with Seattle, we weren't very good. We would lose to Portland. It felt like 10-3 5 times a year. But I'll never forget it. I was going for a walk in Port Moody, where I live, in 2012, and my head scout, Colin Alexander, sent me a text saying, "We won the lottery." And I remember thinking, wow, we're going to be able to draft Matt Barzell first overall in the Bantam draft. And I thought this is going to change our team and our organization for the next few years. And that year's draft, we drafted Matt Barzell number one. We drafted Keegan Kolazar, who's with Vegas now, and a later pick in the first round. And then we drafted Ethan Bear with an early pick in the second round. And that was really the core of our team that gave us the championship 5 years later. So it started with a day in May winning the lottery in 2012, and it culminated in 2017 with the WHL Championship. And I always remember that the year before in 2016, we lost in the final to Brandon, and we knew we were a good team. And then that next year, we thought, if Barzell doesn't make the Islanders, and if a player named Ryan Gropp doesn't stick with the Rangers AHL team, we're going to be a really good team again. And we added a few pieces, and we, blew through Tri-Cities in the first round, beat Kelowna again, made it to the finals again. And I remember going down for a game. I think it was game 3, Regina and Calgary, or Regina and Seattle, and we lost, and we were down 2-1, and I was sad driving back to Vancouver, and then we ended up winning two more. And then I remember watching at home game 6 against Regina. I remember it like it was yesterday. We were down 3-1 in the middle of the third period, and I thought, man, game 7, like, I don't know about, like, this is going to be tough. They had Sam Steele and some other good players, and we got a power play goal to make it 3-2. Then we tied at 3-3. Then it went to overtime, and our team that year was so deep and so well balanced. We had Barzell on the first line, an amazing second line center named Scotty Enzer, and then our third liner was named Alexander True, who's played a little bit in the NHL with San Jose. And I'll remember, like, he went down the wing, chipped it by, took a shot, a Regina player like slid into the goalie, and True was just standing there with a wide open net. So you kind of thought, wow, and he put it in the net. And I almost hit the ceiling. I jumped so high. It was so exciting because, like I said, we were a weak team for a bunch of years. And then to be able to get and climb the mountain and get to the final and then win that championship was so exciting. And as a scout, you're not a huge piece of the organization, but you're a small piece, but you're just so excited for all your scout brothers that you've been scouting with the team for so long, and so happy for the organization. And it was a really cool moment, and one I'll never forget.
Yeah, a great piece to kind of remember and very vividly by the sounds of it. But people always see the thing with scouting is, again, like you said, even you were there for a number of years and you had that key draft, and then it's a few years down the road when you see the success. A scout's kind of impact on a team isn't seen overnight. A lot of times it is 4 and 5 years down the road, and even at the highest level, especially at the NHL level, where it can be a little more cutthroat, and obviously people move around and move positions. A scout's work might not be really evident, in the team's success until maybe 2 or 3 years after they've left the organization. So to be able to be there,
and a cool story about the little impact scouts can make is that year in 2016-17, we had a good team, but we knew we needed to add maybe a third or fourth defenseman in the depth chart. And I was coaching BWC at the time, and we went to watch a WHL game in Calgary, and there was this big defenseman named Aaron Hyman that played for the Hitmen, and I was sitting front row with our team watching the game, and he kept coming down, and I kept thinking, like, he's the type of player that Seattle would really like and would make and be perfect in that 3-4 role in that team. And I sent our GM Russ Farwell a text saying, "Hey, you might want to look at this Hyman guy because he's pretty good, and I think you'd be a good fit." And I left it at that. And then 2 weeks later, I was scrolling Twitter, and then boom, Seattle Thunderbirds acquire Aaron Hyman for who I don't even remember who it was for. And what's cool is he ended up being one of the players that got an assist in that game-winning goal in Game 6 of the WHL final. So again, that's a small way a scout can make an impact. Go suggest a player to your GM. Maybe it was a difference. Maybe Russ already liked him in the first place, but then he was added to the team, and then he was a big part of that championship goal. So that's kind of when I think about scouting, I think about the small impact that a scout can make, which ends up being a big impact. Just a little thing like that.
Yeah, it really is. It can be a game changer. And like you said, who knows if he was on the radar before, but maybe it was that suggestion that ultimately brought him in. And, anytime you can win a championship at that level, you're going to make the moves necessary. So a great story there, and probably inspire other scouts to kind of speak up when they see a player as well. Moving into a lot of the positions that you've had, it's been through connections and people you've met. And I always feel that making connections and making networks is a great way to move forward in the industry. And the people at My Hockey Resource feel the same way. They're a community on Discord, and they have coaches, scouts all over the world involved in talking about different topics and asking different questions. So for anybody looking to create more connections and kind of interact with people in the hockey world in this capacity, be sure to check out My Hockey Resource on Twitter and Instagram. Leland, one of the things they talk about a lot on there is the different resources that they like to learn from. It could be books, programs, articles, different things like that. For you, what are some of your favorite resources that you like to learn from or just look to for new ideas?
Well, I got a lot of those. I'd say one of your sponsors, InStat, was a game changer for me. I've spent hours and hours and hours, especially during COVID, just nerding out on InStat. And I think as a scout or a coach, you can learn so much from especially the platform that InStat provides. Being able to think of a prospect or an NHL player, go to their episode search, click, Anthony Cirelli puck battles last 3 games, and then watching 10 minutes of that. Like you can get so much out of it, and you can learn so much. I felt like when I started helping out video scouting with my regular scouting, I think I became a 20% better scout. So InStat would be a big one. I think the coach's site is a good one too. And a personal story is the coach's site founder, Aaron Wilbur. We worked at an academy together forever ago. And I remember one day him saying, "Oh, I'm starting a hockey coaching website." And I went, "Oh yeah, cool." And then it ended up being the coach's site, which is a great area. I think there's lots of good articles as well on The Athletic from many different sports. You kind of have to dig, if for those really good articles. But if you do, there's some gold stuff in there, and those are for sure. And I'm always reading books and trying to get better.
There's so many different things out there, and definitely InStat, a great platform, and the coaches site as well. Ironically, they both work together in a lot of capacities, so a lot of information sharing going on there. But the coaches site really is a thing that I look to as well to learn from, and so many books, articles, a lot of things even outside of the game of hockey that can be tied back in and really fuel your passion and fuel your knowledge in that area. Moving into your personal connections, you've talked about some people who have helped you along the way and maybe show you the ropes in different capacities. So once again, as I ask everybody on the podcast to do, talk about some of those key mentors who helped you in the game and what are some of the major lessons that they taught you collectively.
Sure. In Seattle, our head scout was Colin Alexander. He's a scout for Pittsburgh Penguins now. He was a great mentor and learned the sort of scouting ropes and what that's like as well. Our GM, Russ Farwell, has a ton of NHL experience and WHL experience, and he was a great sounding board and would give his opinion and learned a lot from him. And then with Seattle, with Prince George, like I said, Bob Simmons and Mark Lamb, I've learned a lot. And only that couple of years I've been with Prince George. But I mean, probably the biggest couple would be one of my best friends is named Kevin Peterson. He's a scout for the Arizona Coyotes. We talk every day about hockey, and we're two of the biggest hockey nerds you've ever seen. And we're talking every day about hockey and scouting and this player and that player and what we like and who we like. And we definitely learn a lot from each other. I got the chance to, a real good mentor of mine is named Paul Fricker. He's a goalie coach for the Vancouver Giants. We met when he was a goalie coach for the Seattle Thunderbirds, and he was an awesome impact on me. And that's what it's about. It's great when you can give ideas and get advice. And like I said, the old Seattle coach that hired me, Rob Sumner, he's the assistant director of amateur scouting for the Calgary Flames now. So I send him a text here or there to connect with him and see what he's up to. But you can't make it, especially like I've been saying, like not having a super playing background. You definitely need to reach out. You definitely need to connect with people, and they definitely need to appreciate what skills you bring forward. So those types of people have been super important for me.
Yeah, it's great to hear that you've had those connections. And I just want to add the fact that a lot of times, these connections obviously go on to be successful. You mentioned a few NHL personnel and people who are still working in the junior scene. But, sometimes when you meet these people, they're just average people looking to get in the game and maybe very much earlier in their careers. I can remember scouting with the scout.ca, and I believe we had 8 scouts on our staff, and, just trying to learn from them and none of us having any team experience. And then at the end of the season, 3 of us went to the OHL and 1 went straight to the NHL. And now you find yourself having a next level network of connections just from a earlier experience that maybe wasn't in that same caliber of scouts and names. So great to hear that you've been able to build that network, and I'm sure every day you're meeting new people. And I'm sure when COVID is done and we're able to get back in the rinks, it's going to only grow in that capacity, especially with scouts. I know it's a great social event at times and amongst the work as well. Looking into the final question here on the podcast, a lot of people are always looking for that piece of advice to help them move into maybe a coaching capacity or get started in the scouting industry and kind of build their way up into hockey operations. From your experience, what's one final piece of advice that you would give in hopes that somebody would be successful in these areas?
Go to the rink. Take COVID out, but get out to the rink. If and watch games and be in the rink, and people will notice, like, hey, that guy's always watching games. That guy's always scouting. He's always involved with something. Get involved with as much as you possibly can, and just grow. 1% better every day. And that's all you can do. And I think that would be my best advice. And what I've done personally is I just did as much as I could possibly do involved with hockey, and try to get better and enjoy that in the moment as you're doing it.
Yeah, tremendous piece of advice. Just get out there as much as you can. Put yourself out there. If you don't know things, simply ask and put yourself in front of the right people to learn these aspects. And who knows, maybe down the road you'll be a WHL champion and getting to work with some of the best players in the world. So, Leland, I just want to thank you again for joining me today on the podcast. I always love chatting hockey and especially scouting and coaching and some of the experiences that you've had. So I wish you all the best moving forward, and hopefully we can get back in the rinks here soon.
Thank you very much. You guys got a great podcast. I go out on walks all the time, throw in a Hockey Minds podcast, and love all your guests you've had.
All right. I really appreciate that. Take care.
Thank you.